Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop and another Sunday video. Um, Sorry this week there's only been one video. It's been one hell of a week and hectic doesn't exactly cover it. There's been multiple issues this week, one of which being the cherry picker that's on high up of the timber frame repair work was delivered on Tuesday. Supposed to have been delivered first thing Tuesday morning. It wasn't delivered till nearly 2 o'clock. And when it did turn up, it won't run on a surface that isn't anything but a dead level concrete floor, which wasn't disclosed when it was hired. And anyway, the week culminated in the clutch in my 2020 Transit deciding it was going to leave the chat completely. So that is now knackered. So we need to speak to garage on Monday and see if we can get that done. So yeah, consequently, only one video got done. And I'm sorry about that, guys, but that's just how it is. Things are about to get a hell of a lot more hectic with stage 2, the planning for stage 2 of the Centre in the Past project, and a couple of other things I can't disclose yet. I might do a video Tuesday on them when I know a bit more, but anyway, we will see. So anyway, today's video, on to the subject of today's video. I, as you know, asked for video requests, and I've had quite a few now. But I had a gentleman contact me recently for a very specific video. He wanted to know about these very thin chisels here. These are, you can see it's incredibly thin. I can get it to focus, but quite wide. This one's a Moorwood brand. It was made in Sheffield. It says they're warranted cast steel. So what are they? Well, they are Sash pocket chisels, as I'm sure many people have heard them called and seen them around and about. But what is a Sash pocket? What is a Sash pocket chisel for? Well, you can see here with this window, this is the window. I'll just plonk that one back down for a second. This is the window that was done, the Victorian window that was undertaken on the window restoration course by my students who came on that course. And we took this very, very rough, very tired Victorian window, quite a small window, has beautiful etched glass in, but we took this window and we took it from a state where it had actually been ripped out of the building to be replaced with a UPVC window into a once again working and functioning window. Now, as you see, you have your weights for your sashes, and if we can pull one of these sashes up and down, you'll see the weights slide in the box on their cords. So obviously, when we fit a sash window, we have to have a means to get these weights into the box. Now these two are lead weights, but normally the cast iron weights for this window would have been that long or so. And they need to be accessed through to tie them onto these cords, which feed over the top of the pulleys. So this is looking at it from the back. We have an access door here, which is called a pocket. So this is a Victorian window, and it's very common for you to see on Victorian windows, they drilled a hole here and then sawed down this edge. And actually the Victorians often sawed this edge and this edge too before they used their pocket chisel. In a Georgian job, a pocket like this is not uncommon. So this pocket is not what's classed as a centre pocket in later work that would come down here, but it's not exactly an edge pocket either. This was a reasonable standard Georgian work. Now, you always find with boxes, the boxes themselves are often very rough. They're very crudely made things. And that's because these boxes were produced to be built into houses as they were being built. So as houses were being modified, as houses were being built, frontages were, being bricked up. These boxes were often built in by the bricklayers that had been fixed in position where they needed to be plumb and level by the bricklayers, by the builders, and they would have actually been bricked into position. So the sills sometimes had a horn on here. The heads often had a horn that were built in, and there was often then a timber lintel that went over the top and trapped it all into place. But the pocket is essential. You cannot then, once these boxes, obviously this box here has a cover on the back, has this nailed on thin board, which is what this window would have had originally. It would have had a nailed on cover on the end, possibly. There's no evidence of nail holes down the outer lining. However, this was in a timber framed house. This was in a stick framed house, this window. So it may have been that these were never covered. However, these ones that were built in, which is the more common type in England, these covers were more common in England because they were built in to brickwork. I've got a really good example of a Victorian one, and you can actually still see the lines where the lime mortar was touching between each brick and has stained the outer of this box. So we have here a pocket cover. This one would actually be too narrow for this chisel. So these, I've got two this size, which are nearly 2 inches. In fact, I think they're a little bit more than 2 inches. But that would fit to take out the entire side of this box. So this one is quite a narrow pocket cover, in that it doesn't extend to the full width of the inner face of the sash. That's not common. This is not a common design. This is a window from Bridge down near Canterbury in Kent. Up here in Warwickshire, we tend to find that the pocket covers all sit all to one side, and that's where a chisel like this comes into play. So I've actually set it up. I've set my piece up to work with this chisel, and I'm actually going to do so you see this one? This one is right to one side. The Victorian one is right to the side, and I'm going to do a cover like that. We see very little in historical texts that shows anything much about pockets and how pockets were made. This book was by Corkill and Dowsett, but was edited by Richard Greenley, I believe. Yeah, these are the edited by Richard Greenley versions. This is a fantastic set of books, and it's called Joinery and Carpentry. This one's volume 2. I would recommend anybody who wants to go into building conservation or joinery work or anything like that to get themselves a copy of one of these, or a set of one of these books. So this is one of the few examples we see of actually a pocket layout. And in the text, it's talking of this is a centre pocket, and this was used on higher status work, and that this is a sawn pocket and is used on lower status work. I've actually produced top sloped pockets like this for work, for replacements. They're very easy to do. However, I still don't think you do see it, but for a very short spell of time. You don't see it in Georgian work. You don't see it in much Victorian work. You see it occasionally in Edwardian windows, and that's it. But this is the only detail I can find on sash pockets in my books. Normally, you have a stepped cut here that's straight, and you have a slightly sloping cut on the top that catches, so they push up and in. So when you push it in from the bottom, it sits on a ledge here, but it it's trapped under a slightly chamfered cut on the top. This type here, with this back slope, only work where you can screw the pocket covers on, which long term isn't good because you're going to be often having to repair and replace your pocket covers, or you're going to have to repair this back section because it's going to get to the point when you've had the screws out 2 or 3 times, it's actually not going to bite still. So yeah, so what are we going to do? We're going to do something very similar to this big one, which is, let's get this one back just briefly and show you a close-up of that. So what we have here is they're flat stepped, but looking at the grain on this, you can feel that it was cut with a chisel. This one was sawn. You can feel the saw marks in it at the back. And this one was sawn. And this one was chiseled. No, this one was sawn actually, and this one was chiseled on this one. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the Sash chisel and we're going to take a piece of waste for today, and we're going to look at what we would do. So I've played the groove like I would if it was a proper pulley style. This is just around 1 inch thick, which is quite common thickness for pulley styles. You can see here I've marked my step cuts out. So what would we do? Well, I would, quite standard, I would come in here with a vertical cut. And I actually prefer to cut these. I'm going to show you on the other end how I would normally do them. But this is how you would cut them entirely with your Sash chisel. And like I say, it was very crude work. Making Sash windows in the Georgian period was crude. Certainly making the boxes was crude work. And this is why the chisels need to be so thin. You can see there, the end cut that comes off the chisel. I would then, at this end, I'm going to actually saw it, because you do find a mix of both methods quite regularly. And it's also quite common to see a shadow line off the saw where they've sawn them. There's very little difference in the kerf size between the gent saw and the Sash pocket chisel. The pocket chisel is definitely easier. And it's also definitely quicker in a production environment. But if you want to start putting angled tops in, it's not so easy with the pocket chisel. The pocket chisel needs to cut straight down, otherwise it actually breaks this fibre as it comes in. Okay, so we have our first 2 cuts. This one with the gent saw, and this one with the pocket chisel. Both down to depth. Okay, and as I say, both of a similar kerf width. The only difference is you get a bit of bruising on the faces on this side. Then we flip the board over. going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to make my back cuts before I make my saw cut. And it's important with a sash chisel, you roll it that way. You don't lever it side to side like that, because you will snap the corner off it or snap the end off it. They're only very thin chisels, these. And the same actually goes for a lot of, for carving chisels and things, where you're driving a deep strike line. If you letter carving, you always roll the chisel that way. You don't ever roll a chisel that way. In this sort of thin chisel like this, that way. There are times with a mortise chisel and things like that where you need to, but not with a thin chisel like this. Okay, so the next cut is going to be very difficult to get you to see, but we'll have a go. So I've set the work up in the vise. I've set it up flat-ish. I may need to go flatter still. But I'm literally going to put my saw, the tip of my my tenon saw, directly into that curve. And again, you often find you get an overstrike here. And it's by studying this sort of thing that I've worked out how this work was being done. I've looked at hundreds of windows now that I've restored, some of which I've replaced, and only by replacement and getting close up and being able to take these frames apart do you get to see what was happening, what our predecessors were doing, and what joiners have been doing for centuries. Okay, and that gives us a real insight into how this work was undertaken. Right, I could go all the way now with my tenon saw. The problem is with going in with the tenon saw is that you're always, I'm through there, you're always pushing waste forwards with the saw and it gets bunged up at this end of the cut. So it's not going to be so easy for you guys to see now, but I would always come in now. I've got a really well-worn, well-battered Diston that I use, but you could use a keyhole saw or a compass saw. I like this little Diston. I do like this little Diston. If I can get it in there and get it to start. Maybe I wasn't right through. I thought I was right through there. No, not quite. Sorry guys. That's it, I'm right through now. Thought I was before, but obviously I wasn't. So for the last cut, I do just stand it virtually upright, just to make sure I can get down to my line. And this is why I keep this old Diston, worn out Diston saw. You know, it's not practical for a lot of uses, but it is the best saw this job by far. Just a touch more at the top there. Right. Get rid of that a second. So, there we go. Now got a nice clean cut. And as I said, you sometimes see a slight overstrike here. And it's very difficult when you're running that saw in to not just skip over a bit, but it's not very deep. You do see it. You do see evidence of this. And this is how I've sort of pinned down my methodology of doing these pockets. I'm seeing evidence of this sort of thing. And I know, and that's how I've worked my angles out and things like that, is that if I'm not producing similar sort of cuts, or the evidence isn't similar to what was happening in period work, then I know I'm not quite in the right place. So then you'll see here, you need to just nip that a bit further along there. So we'll do that now. Right, can you guys still see that? So what I need to do is just need to nip tight to the saw line, make sure I'm tight to the saw line. And the same there. Right, at this stage, I would actually come into the vise now, because what we have left is a piece of waste there and a piece of waste here. Now, again, from evidence that I've found, I don't think these guys were adding a second or a third, phase into this. I think they were literally taking their Sash pocket chisel and they were popping them out like this. There's a little bit of a knot just there in that corner. That one hasn't gone as nice as the other end. It didn't go very nice at all, but it's not a pretty piece of timber just there. Not at all pretty just there, but that, I believe, is how many of these pocket covers were done. Okay, because you never find them flat and pretty here. They always follow the grain. That one, so the bottom side here, I have got just a bit of rolled over grain. It's not pretty. But again, it's a very quick demonstration piece. It's not a nice piece of timber. It's not the sort of quality of timber I would normally make window sashes with. But you do find on the pockets and on here, they're very rough. And that's how I know when somebody's been messing with a window. It's also how I know if these pocket covers have been changed, because if this housing looks like this here, like it's been split out, but then this piece is perfectly flat and smooth, like it's been sawn out, you know that that's been messed with. But that, guys, is how a Sash pocket chisel was used. Okay? And like I say, this end is not pretty. If that was going out, I would need to just take a bench chisel. We'll do that now. Get a little bench chisel and we'll just do a little bit of cleanup so that we can have a really smartly fitting pocket. So this is a bit of rough red deal. I wouldn't normally I wouldn't normally use red deal for pockets. I don't find it's, or for pulley styles, because unfortunately I don't find it lasts. These days, the longevity can be an issue with it, and so I don't tend to use it. And like I say, actually since the war in the Ukraine, finding quality now is also a difficult task. There we have it, a nice flush fitting, tight fitting sash pocket. Okay, and as you can see now, because you don't get the bruising with the saw kerf on the outer face like you do there, it looks tighter fitting. Okay, so I do tend to saw this outer face these days, and I do use these finer curved gent saws to do that with, because they are just such a fine curve. You don't get this bruising you get with a pocket chisel. But that's it. That is effectively what I see day to day. That's the sort of standard you see. You know, you've seen how quickly I knocked that one out. It can be improved using a few modern methods, but if you want to have a split out pocket cover, that's how they were done. A single piece of pocket cover, that's how they were done. And like I say, I do use a fine saw. You could use an even finer tooth razor saw or a jeweler's saw or an instrument making saw if you wanted to get this curve to an absolute minimum. And as I say, on the cuts that would be chamfered on the top here like that, so they would have a chamfered cut top like that, you've got to make sure that you saw those, because you'll just fold the timber up here. So that's it for today's practical demonstration, guys. If anybody wants to see more of this stuff or understand more of this stuff, drop it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. I will get to all the suggestions. I promise get to all the suggestions for the videos. Some of them I definitely need help on because of changing camera angles and things like that. Others I need to do a little bit more research myself before I lay them down. The much anticipated video on the mouldings with quirks and things like that, that is coming. I've laid a couple of sections down now. I need to intro and outro and things like that for that. I have started that video, but every time I get to that video I get called away with something else. And there's been a lot of prep in that, getting planes ready and that sort of thing. As I say, some of the other videos coming on hollows and rounds, and there's one or two others really good suggestions that have come in the past few weeks, and I will get to all of them over the next 6 months. I can't ensure I can do it quicker than that. But yes, if you want to see more of this sort of stuff, or if you've got any questions about this, or also if you've got a reference book, period reference book with more detail on this, or you know of a period reference book that has more detail on how pocket covers were, or how these pocket covers were produced, please, or in fact any element of sash windows that's got more detail in than the books that were written by architects and surveyors, please do drop it in the comments. as to the the titles and the authors, because I would be interested to see more and more historic text. This method I've come up with from studying Windows myself. There are other ways by the time the Victorian Windows came about, but in the Georgian period, and actually for the more crude Victorian work, this is how I think it was being produced. In fact, this is how I know it was being produced, because I've taken enough windows apart now to know that the marks I'm getting from this kind of work and the results I'm getting from this kind of work are very similar to that of period windows. So yeah, if anybody knows of any historic textbooks and things like that, do drop it in the comment section below as to what they are and who the authors were, and I'll do my best to get copies and read through and let you guys know what I think, and take some of those methods and show you some of those methods. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting the channel, liking, sharing, subscribing. It really does mean the world to me that that's happening, because it's helping the channel grow, and the more the channel grows, the more I'm going to have time to devote to doing things like this, as opposed to getting absolutely filthy on site knocking out hideous resin. Anyway, hopefully you'll see in this week's video, probably it'll either be Tuesday's video or Thursday's video, you'll see I've about knocked out the resin from the gable end, and I'm coming up with one or two solutions as to what we're going to do about rectifying the damage that's been done. Not all of it is going to be to my satisfaction, but I've got a budget to meet, and it's a very tight budget. So I'm having to do things that I would rather not do. However, at this stage in life, I don't want to bust into a full gable end rebuild on that property either. So unfortunately, compromises are having to be made in that, but you'll see I'll explain that more in either Tuesday or Thursday's video. So yeah, keep watching, guys. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.